Alrighty, so welcome to class, guys. Here's what we got cooking. We've got a couple of things that I need to do to catch you guys up. But PHP My Admin, if you are here, send me a screen cap of this page for both PHP My Admin and LDAP. Send it to me today, and you'll get full points for the exercise. If you do not send it to me today, you'll take a 0. All right, I need it in the Dropbox midnight tonight. Yes, sir.
So regardless of whether we have this, whether or not you checked it out, you still want.
I want to see that you've got both installed and ready to go.
Right.
I don't think because I'm missing like about 60% of my class this morning. People thinking it's a 4-day weekend. Lucky. What we've got cooking is we're a little bit behind because of Friday, and I really wanted to kind of cover this, but this seems to have been difficult for people. And that's okay. Difficult is good. But I need to actually see what you guys have got cooking, so just send me the screen cap tonight by midnight, and we should be good to go. And then you guys will get full credit for the assignment. People that do not, don't. So midnight, Dropbox. All right? Huh?
Screen cap.
Screen cap. I want to see this. I just want to see the 2 main pages that you land on. So if you guys are going to manage multiple MySQLs, right, this is going to be the easiest way to do it in terms of working off the command line. So you can pick and choose the databases, and you can create a database in here. So if you wanted to create a snort database, you can pick what it's going to be. If you pick any of these, this is what's called how I'm going to interpret the data that you send me. So if you pick anything other than UTF-8 or collation, you're going to end up with something like Chinese, Bulgarian, Slovakian, Hindu, Turkmenistan. You're going to end up with some really awesome languages. So it's really cool if you speak those languages, but you can really annoy everyone that's part of your team should you choose something other than English. Just pointing that out. All right? So you can create that database. Then when you go into it, you can actually go ahead and then configure that database. So you can create tables. What's really, really cool, though, is a lot of the install software is going to come with an SQL page, right? It's going to be a .SQL. And you can actually cut and paste that into here and then run it, and it will set up your whole database for you. So if you're using WordPress or Drupal or Joomla or Snort or anything else, you can actually just have the database set up this way. So this will make your life a little bit easier. You can actually import databases into other things, and then you can also export. And it will take a compressed zip file. So if you've got a text-based database, this is sweet. If you have a database with a lot of imagery and other stuff, not so sweet. So you need to make sure that you can ship more than 2 megs into your database, right? And that's going to be set in your PHP INI files. How big a file can I upload? Alright, and then the character set UTF-8 is the standard encoding now for English language everything, right? All your web pages are UTF-8, all your databases, everything else, standard English encoding. Alright, allow interruption in case the script reaches the timeout limit. If you're trying to import a really big database, this is a cool way of making sure the database goes through. Alright. Do not use auto increment for 0 values. If you do this and you have it on an index that auto increments, you may blow your database and have to rebuild the entire database on the import. So I would use auto increment if it's on an index that requires a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. That's what they mean by auto increment. Every new row gets a whole new number, right? And then, or you can just go ahead and create a table, number of columns, and all the rest of it. Click on home, and pretty much so run through here. If you need to change your password because you keep on forgetting it, you can actually change the password. I will give you a password hash, or you can generate a password, right? So my SQL database password should be hashed, because if you leave them in the open non-hashed, people like Anonymous will just come in and go, all right, plain text. Thank you, people. We love you. And the next thing you know, you're going down. Right? But that's basically all there is to this. There's some other things. If there's things missing in your database, it will tell you down here at the bottom. Right? And all the rest of it. The LDAP is basically the same thing. right? You can actually go in through the LDAP screens and configure everything, make new users, import users, and all the rest of it. Make sense? So, helps if I spell correctly. All right, if you end up with this, that means that the configuration isn't done. So it's looking at the configuration inside the lib on line 379. This is where you're going to set your rack4, highline, edu, blah, and all the rest of it. So if you're running into this error, that just means it's not configured right to work with the LDAP server that you installed earlier. So kind of makes sense? You guys good? Happy? Go lucky? Wonderful? Yes, sir. You have a question?
No.
Oh, darn. Really? Thank you for being nice to me today. All right. So, but basically, this is where you're going to set up all your configuration for that. So it'd be rack whatever, highline, edu, and all the rest of it. This will make administering your LDAP configuration tons easier. So just remember to send me the screen cap of not of this error, but of the page, right? Send me this page, and you guys are done. You will get 100. People that do not get them in there, you know how that's going to work. All right. So kind of makes sense on how to administer stuff through PHP. All right. One of the things you can do, though, is make sure that the logins are secure. Make sure that it's going to tie back into how you set things up so that people can't just go romping on in there and go start doing things, which are horrible. All right. So that's good there. All right. The next thing we need to do is we're going to install DNS. So DNS, everybody know what DNS is? Domain Name Service?
Yes.
What does DNS do for me?
That translates IP number into a domain name.
Translates text to the number.
It changes the number to a common name that we all understand. So no one's going to remember 172.198.026 as comicsforge.com, but they'll remember comicsforge.com, right? No one's going to remember my IP address, but boy, will they sure remember the name of my site. So Macy's, Bank of America, NFCU, whichever one. We remembered those strings a lot better. So DNS is kind of the backbone of the internet and how we do things, right? So installing DNS is really, really simple to do, right? It's just apt, get, install, bind 9. All right, so bind is the name of the DNS program that is used in Linux, pretty much so.
Did you already do this, Dan?
I don't think we did DNS yet.
I saw the video.
Already have the news version now.
That we've already done it?
Yeah.
Sweet.
Yeah,
So that means we've got DNS. Did we go through the configuration of DNS? Ah, there we go. Let me go ahead and install it then real quick. I have to make a new virtual machine every time I walk in the room because of the way they've set this computer up. I can't keep a virtual machine going.
I can get out someone's hard disk here.
You can do what?
No key. There's not any key working.
Those are all the keys that we have left. We have no other keys. All the keys have been snagged. All right, so everybody go into the Etsy bind directory. You're still downloading what? Bind 9? Okay. Oh, yeah. Yeah, I'm spoiled that way. Bigger bandwidth, more memory. I'm good to go. All right. So how many people am I waiting on to get to Etsy bind?
How many are there?
How many are here? 4, 5, 6. Okay, I'm just going to run through this then. We'll have because we got about half the class caught up, right? So, bind, named conf. This is the big one, right? The named file is basically the root file for everything that you're going to end up doing. Right? What it does is it calls options, local, and then default zones. So just like you were within Microsoft DNS, right? You have your local configuration. Who am I? What do I do? What do I serve? All the rest of it. You have options. Who do I talk to? How do I talk to them? Do I love them? Do I trust them? Right? And then you have zones. So zones would be like rack 3 or rack 4 or rack 5, right? So your zones are who am I responsible for? So you have a reverse and a forward zone, just like you do with Microsoft, right? So if we go into more name.conf.local, all right, so this is who I am. So you can do any local configuration here. So if you're running into some interesting stuff that's going on, you can go ahead and say, this is who I am. This is who I am responsible to. This is how I feel about life. This is where I want to be. If you go into named conf options, I can spell, right? All right, this is where it puts all of the really kind of cool stuff you've got. One of the things I really want to point out is this DNS Sec Validation, right? This guy. So DNS, because it's pretty much so easily confused, because it was written back in the 1980s where everybody loved each other and was love and oneness brother, isn't really quite the reality of 2013 on the internet, where I hate you, I'm a troll, I'm going to bring you down, right? So one of the things that we keep on talking about is DNS poisoning. DNS Sec was created to do DNS secure. All right, it's just DNS secure. Or depending on how purist you are, it's DNS securely. In other words, these are the people that I trust. So if we go out and we try to do stuff with Quest and we try to say, hey, come, let me forward up a couple of new zones to you there, Quest. Because Quest uses DNS Sec and we're not on their trusted list of updaters, it will just ignore us. If they're not using DNS Sec, then we can go in and say, oh, hey, let's point Google at dansevilpage.com. Right? So DNS Sec was designed and created to turn around so that I have a very trusted body of stuff that I can talk to. The only problem is when a trusted DNS system gets overtaken, right? Which does happen. So when you do DNS Sec Validation Auto, what it's going to do is it's going to go, can I talk to you securely? Do you trust me? Do I trust you? If the answer's no, then the thing will fail. It won't go through, and you'll see that in your syslog. If the answer is yes, then it will go through and do the DNS exchange. Well, this is the new IP address for this website. This is who I am. I'm part of your trusted list. It's one great big huge trusted family party out here, right? You can set it up so if you say DNS validation no, then it will just spew DNS to anyone that it can talk to, right? Which is really, really cool if you're a bad guy. So it kind of makes sense on what goes in here. More name.conf.default zones. So this is where you set up all the stuff that for our databases, right? So we have the database root. Prime the server with knowledge of the root server zone, right? So root servers, there's only about like maybe a dozen of them here in the United States, right? So we don't really muck about with root servers, but if they know who the root server is, how it works logically, right, is I have it on my computer. I know who this site is. So if I go to comicsforge.com and I go there all the time, it will cache it locally, right? So that's my DB local, right? If I don't know who it is, because it's a new website, I'm going out to lovespandex.com, right? Seeing if y'all paying attention. Spandex is awesome. Then it will go to the next step, right? It will go to local company server and say, okay, do you know who lovespandex.com is? And if it doesn't know, then it will move up the hierarchy. It will go to Quest. And then if Quest doesn't know who lovespandex.com is, it will go up to the root server. So that's why you see sometimes when you build a new website, it can take 12 to 72 hours to register that DNS name in the system. Because what happens is I register it locally at my host, then my host goes ahead using DNS Sec and updates the next level server until it reaches the root level, and then that cascades down internationally. So it's really kind of cool how this works, but that's why it takes 12 to 72 hours, right? So when you're registering a new domain to actually be able to use it. Make sense? One of the things I've noticed the host servers do, though, is that when you register a new domain and you're bringing a new website up, it will actually cache that locally for you in your computer, right? So when I was building a new website for a friend of mine called badneighborreport.com, right, we were still able to work on it as badneighborreport.com because we were cached locally. But it took 72 hours for everyone else in the world to be able to see it, which was awesome because the only way it would work was through Facebook. Right? If you tried to get to it on your cell phone or you tried to get to it from your iPad, it wouldn't work. Show post not available. Right? But on our computers it would work, and through Facebook it would work. So that tells me that Facebook's really close to the root server. Right? So it's probably root server Facebook for all those domains. So it can manage those domains and get data out quicker. The closer you are to the root, the easier it is for you to get all the fresh new updates for what's going on. So it kind of makes sense? So your DB root, populate that with the root servers for DNS. Your local, DB local, would be things like, I'm running the server here, so my IP address goes in here, and then my Quest DNS would go in here for second and third, right? Because I'm running a DNS server. Then when you build up a client, you point them at your box, and then as their secondary, they point off to Quest, right? So that you can cache locally. But the good part is that if I say, hey, let's go to badneighborreport.com, it will query me first. And if I don't know it, then I start querying up the chain until someone knows who this place is, right? So I will build it up in my local database. So it kind of makes sense? And those are about the ones that you want to muck about with. DB127 is just local, it's for testing. Right, and 255 is for that specific computer alone. All right. So if we go into DB local, here's how this actually reads. All right, this is the data file for the local loopback interface. Right, TTL, time to live. Everybody remember that from early networking days? TTL, time to live, 604,800 seconds. That's a long time to live. Right? You can like circle the globe a couple billion times with that amount of time. But the idea is that as it reroutes through the internet, if something gets taken out, like a data center or something else, it will still reroute as it needs to. Right? In start of authority, SOA, start of authority. This is who I am responsible for. This is where I become an authorized DNS server. Right? Localhost, root, localhost. Okay? Serial 2, in other words, I can do 2 serial lines at the same time. As I can branch off to 2 other DNS servers at the same time. I will refresh my internal DNS every 604,800 seconds. So if you're running a server farm, if you're running a hosting company like DreamHost, right, your refresh rate is going to be a lot shorter than 608,000. Actually, I wonder how many minutes that is. Anybody want to take a wild guess?
100 minutes.
604, 800, that's seconds, so we want to divide by 60 for minutes, and then we want to divide by 24 for hours. So I'm going to refresh every 420 days. No, I would change that to a different number. I would want, depending on who you are, usually I'm going to want to refresh daily, right? So however many seconds goes, if I have 24 hours in a day times 60 minutes times 60 seconds, I would change my number to 86,400, right? If I want it to refresh every day. So remember that this is in seconds. I retry every day, 86,400. So I will retry all these sites that are building up that I don't have a clue who they are just once a day. Right? I will expire a website if it's not used out of my database. Right? Probably that's what, 4 or 5 years. Right? So if you're in a high dynamic environment with a lot of things changing, you change it around. And negative cache time to live, in other words, as things drop off, how long do I keep them in the spare cache, right? So in NS localhost, in name server is localhost, in A, all right, A is a type of record, it's an alias record, right? 127001, in quadruple A, colon 1. So we have bunches of different kinds of records. We have a CNAME record, right? So comicsforge.com would be a CNAME record for that IP address. www.comicsforge.com would be an alias, an A record for comicsforge.com. So that www, before and after or not, would be a CNAME and then an alias. So if someone comes through on www as an alias, it will go, oh wait, that really goes over here. So we'll actually forward that off to comicsforge.com. So kind of a cool way on how CNAME and A records actually work, right? So CNAME, common name, and then A for alias. So these are your root servers, and thank God we don't have to populate this. These are the people that actually own and run and control the internet. They are God. We must bow before our robotic overlords. I have spam on my head. Nope. All right, so your root servers. These are the guys that own the internet, right? So you have arootservers.net, and this is how much time I'm going to talk to them, as an alias for this IP address, right? So if you type in nslookup arootservers.net, it will actually translate over to that IP address and send you on your way, right? So these are all of them. These are the big boys that we're going to deal with, and again, at least we don't have to do anything with it. So kind of makes sense? You guys sure? So at least we don't have to do anything with that. But if you get a new root server, then you can do really, really cool stuff with it. So db.0, again, same thing, it points off to your local host. If you change stuff in db local, make sure you change stuff in db0. Otherwise, they get into a contest inside the computer and they start duking it out for who's going to be God, right? So if you change one, make sure you change everything along the way. And then more zones.rfc1918. All right, so zones. Remember that when we were doing reverse zones that we had to start with the IP address backwards, right? So it'd be 100127, right? This is where you do stuff backwards. All right, so when you're making a reverse lookup zone, this is where you send your data in. All right, and then it will go ahead and write this stuff out to the db empty file. All right, so there's some kind of stuff that you can kind of see what should go in here. So if you're on a private network, 10.in address ARPA, anything that's 10, and I see it, and I see a translation for it, so 10, 10, 10, 10 may be just www locally inside the building, right? Then it will start caching that into db empty for you. Does that make sense? Are you guys comfortable with DNS? Well, I say comfortable as, okay, I have a basic idea of what I want to do now. What on God's green earth does he want next?
Yes.
So everyone's comfortable? We all have definitions for whatever. All right, so you're relatively comfortable with what needs to be done here, or what's in these files itself.
Yes.
All right. Sweet. All right. So bind keys we're not going to worry about. Root. And that should do, that's just about does it. That's what's all in DNS. All right? Okay. So don't really have to do much with this. All we need to do is tell it who our upstream providers are. So what you want to just kind of do then is go into name.conf.local. right? So if we're going to do stuff, considering adding the 1918 zones here, any local configuration file here, right? So we should unmark I spelled it out. So what we want to do is we want to unmark because it's hashed out. So that means it's a comment. So we want to include the zones, right? Especially if you've gone through and you've made your own zones inside of the RFC 1918. Make sense?
What is that? RFQ 1987.
All right, the RFC 1987 is a file that contains all your reverse lookup zones. So that's basically what's in there, right? So that if you need to, if you have an IP address and it's not quite working for you, you can go in and start deconstructing that IP address to figure out what common name there is for that particular IP address.
But for right now, then we're not doing anything since ours are working. It's fine.
Mm-hmm.
If we're having an issue,
then this is where you want to go and check it out and all the rest of it. So really the only change you need to make is just go ahead and include the reverse zones in this so it's not always looking forward. And that brings some of the processing off of your upstream provider onto you. And then that's it. So make it easy. So everyone comfortable with DNS? To the point, I have an idea of what it is. I'm good with it. All right. All right. So there's one thing I do need to do. I'm going to install Apache here real quick because now that we have DNS working, now we can tell Apache who our common name is. Who are we? I have to rebuild the VirtualBox every morning. So it's sort of like I have to start from scratch every day. So if we go into Etsy Apache 2, right, and we go into all right. So if we go into the Apache configuration file, apache2.config, this is where we can actually start setting up stuff, right? So let me just do a Pico apache2.conf. All right, so let's kind of do this just a little bit. So we go screaming down here to, all right, so we go, well, what?
You just did Pico, why does it say Nano?
Because I just removed the word Pico and did Nano instead. So
Pico Nano,
Pico Nano, or it all starts looking the same after a while. All right. So if we go into our global configuration, right? Server root. If you installed stuff in Apache, we want to change server root over to where we went, right? So we can actually say server root is var www. If you put the trailing slash after it, it's going to look for another subdirectory underneath it. So trailing slash, generally a bad idea when you're putting a server root. But if you need to modify where your server root is, because the default is Etsy Apache 2, this is the place to do it. And it's actually really kind of cool how this works, right? Is everybody with me in global configs? So this is the top directory where all the server configuration and log files and everything else, right? All right, timeout is 300 seconds. So how many is 300 seconds in minutes?
5 minutes.
5 minutes. If you are running a high availability server, you can take your timeout down, right? Especially if you've got a lot of stuff. If you're running a server where you don't really care, if the client session times out, you can raise the amount of time on that. If you're running something with JSON or REST or AJAX or any other start and stop kind of protocols where just data feed munge, data feed back, change your timeout down a bit, right? Because they want concurrent data. Especially if you're doing something like Facebook, you move away from the page, then you move back to the page. bring it in the highlighted focus again, and all of a sudden your Facebook page auto-populates with lots of cool stuff. That's because of the timeout and how the JSON and REST protocols work, right? It's based on focus. So you can change your timeout down here a bit, so it can kind of help you out depending on what you got. Keep alives. Do I want to have a persistent connection between the client and my server? And you have to think about computational overhead. You've only really got about 40 to 50,000 ports you can use per server, right? If I keep them alive, I'm going to consistently suck up that one port. So if I go away from the test that I'm taking, right, and I come back 8-9 hours later, then I've basically consumed resources on the server side that while the server was happy to do it, maybe someone didn't get that resource because of that, right? Most companies do keep alives on all the time because of the way things are set up with Twitter and Facebook and social media and all the rest of it, right? So your keep alive is on because I want a persistent connection between the client and my server so I can auto-update, auto-populate, keep that client up all the time, right? But you pay for the computational overhead. All right, the maximum number of keep alive requests that I will do. So the maximum amount that I will allow being connected to my server all the time is set to 100. So this is a really low end kind of server. So if I want to change it so that I've got more and I can service better data, I'm going to change it over to 50,000. Right? If I trust that my server knows what to do best, I'll make it 0 for unlimited.
Zero is unlimited.
0 is unlimited. It will suck up as many resources as it can. Right? Kind of make sense? All right. Keep alive timeout. This is the number of seconds to wait on someone. I'll wait for you for 5 seconds. If you don't go back into center of focus on that page within 5 seconds, I'm going to drop it anyways. But let's say I want to leave it open for 5 minutes. Whoops. Oh, did I hit the wrong darn thing? Woo! Keep alive timeout. So let's say I want to change this over. Oh, I know what I'm doing wrong. I'm trying to use the number pad. Number lock on. There we go. Keep alive timeout, 300. Right? That's 5 minutes. But let's say if I wanted to leave it on for 500 minutes. So that's kind of that decision you need to make when you're scaling something out. Right? 500 minutes. It's about, what, 4 or 5 hours? Server pool size. If you have, you can actually change the number of things that you're going to start. If you want to start servers and processes, so remember when you do the ps-ef grep Apache or grep HTTPD, you see that small column I started off with 5. This is how it tells it start off with 5, right? So it's going to start off with 5. It will always keep 5 running. Maximum servers it will run is 10, right? Maximum number of clients it will accept is 150, right? Maximum requests per child is unlimited. So remember in Linux that it's parent-child relationship. I have the master Apache, and then I have all these little children running around screaming and consuming resources and doing other horrible things to my computer, right? So if you know you're going to be in a high availability environment, you can start 500 of them. Minimum spare servers, leave it at 50. If I want to have maximum spare servers, maximum clients, I want to be able to handle a lot. So this is how I'm going to go ahead and set it up for a more high performance server. Right? Start servers, spare threads. Remember, parent-child relationship will open up a threading model on a Linux box. So I will always have 25 threads spare just in case someone does something crazy. I'm going to have a maximum spare threads of 75. Right? Thread limit. I'm only going to allow one client to open up 64 threads per process. Right? And that thread may be MySQL. It may be an image. It may be a chunk of text. So think about this when you're loading up a page. How many elements do you have per page? Right? Because if I'm limited at 64 and you have 65 elements, I'm missing one. I'll never see it. right? Threads per child, each child can only open up 25 threads at a time, which changes how your Apache works, right? So if I'm only going to allow 25 threads, I have a maximum of 64 per child process, and I have a page with 100 elements, right? I'm going to load 25 elements, then I'm going to load the rest up to 64, then I'm going to wait for all those elements to load, then I'm going to load the remaining elements. Performance. What is the performance if I load 25, then I load the next to 64, and then I load the next? Right? So depending on how large your elements are, so like some of my imagery is 10 megs a shot, and I'm opening up 40 to 50 thumbnails of that at 1 meg a piece, that page that I designed is a 400 meg page with about 125 different elements in it, which means the performance is absolutely going to blow on someone with a slow speed or someone that has their settings not quite right in the Apache server. So you can customize this for not just how many people you're expecting, but how many page elements you're shipping down the road to the customer, right? So if someone says there's a performance issue with web page loads, this is where you can go in and start mucking about with it and see if you can get a little bit more performance boost out of your box. Make sense? Remember, if you change your clients, you have to change it all the way through. All right? So you're a user and your group. If you want to run Apache as someone else other than Apache, right? You can actually have Apache underneath a special user and group at the same time. If you do change this, please make sure that they do not have a bin bash shell, right? Because remember, Apache just drops off to the log. If you give your new group something to a bin bash shell and they go ahead and they pop the memory on your Apache server, then you've given them shell, and they will love you because they will do horrible things to your computer. Some programs that you'll use require something called HT access. HT access is a way of limiting what people can do on your box, right? Or increasing permissions for very specific things. If you run a normal web server, you're going to see something inside your web server called crossdomain.html. And that means that these are domains I trust to deliver content to the people that are consuming off my system, right? So I'll trust Adobe Flash, right? And I'll trust it coming in from Adobe Flash. But if I put into that Dan's Evil website, then that's a problem. HT access is a way of narrowing down Adobe Flash so it can only do specific things on your computer. You'll also find that files like WordPress and Joomla and Drupal, all the CMSs, have special access requirements based on the directories that they're in. So they will automatically modify this HT access file for you when you install them. Files. If I have a file that starts with .htaccess that has usernames, passwords, all sorts of cool stuff in there, I don't want people to open them up directly, not coming in off the Apache server. So, order, allow, deny. Deny from all, satisfy from all. This is like a little mini firewall rule. So any file that starts with .ht, like .htaccess, we will allow and then deny. So the order, I'll allow, but then I'll deny. So deny from all. That means no one coming in off port 80 can get to this file, but people actually on the server can. All right, and then satisfy all requirements that are local. So kind of a cool way of looking at this. Default types. So these are your MIME types. If it's a JPEG, if it's a text, HTML, all that stuff that's in your browser. Default type, there's no specific default type. Your server will serve everything right off the bat, right? Hostname lookups. If you turn on logging, because you already have logging, you have the opportunity to turn on DNS at the same time. And if I come through from Comcast, it will actually, instead of giving you an IP address, will give you the name Comcast.net, which is really kind of cool. But there's that computational overload, again, that you kind of need to think about. If I'm doing DNS lookups for everyone that's coming through on a slow web server without a whole lot of clients, it's okay. But if you're Facebook or your Twitter, that turns into a nightmare, and you'd want to offload that processing onto something else, right? And there's other packages to do that with. But if you're having a performance problem, go through and take a look at it. And if they have host name lookups on, that's probably where about 20% of all your horsepower in your server is being consumed right now by that one process. Error log, Apache logdir error log. Right, so we're all familiar with the Apache error log underneath var www. Right, log level. If you want to have more stuff, if you're debugging certain applications and other things, you can change your log level down to debug for testing, which is awesome if someone's throwing new code out there at the web server. Normally it's warn. It'll only log warning and above. So warning, oh my god, we're all going to die, emergency, critical, panics. Right? It will leave debug and user and all that other stuff kind of out of the mix, which is great. But if you're testing, then go ahead and change this down to debug or user, so you can kind of help your guy out who's debugging code. Right? Include module configurations, include everything that ends in .load and everything that ends in .configuration file. Include ports configuration. These are the ports I'm going to listen on. Alright, this includes name-based virtual hosts. So I'm going to listen on port 80, I'm going to listen on port 8080, 88, 88, 88. You can tell it which port you want to listen on. Virtual hosts for the same thing, right? Because no one web server is ever dedicated to a specific client unless you have a dedicated server model. But most of the things like DreamHost and GoDaddy and all the rest of it are working off of virtual hosts. So one IP address will host a couple 100,000 different websites. And that's where web hosts come in. And that's how we can tell what we're going to listen to. You can change over your log format. Alright, include generic snippets of statements and conf.d. So if I didn't do it right, I can actually do little code snippets inside of this. Right? Include sites enabled. So if I have a virtual host, I will include the sites enabled file. And once you've done that, you can just save it off. I was confused by that. So, in this file, I'm going to listen to everything on port 80, right? So you can change that listen port over to whatever you want to do. I'm also going to listen on port 443 because we've enabled mod SSL. Alright? So, 80, 443. Real simple. If you want to listen on port 80 and 8080, just hit enter after listen 80 and put in a new port number and it will automatically start that up for you. But it will start up each port with what you set your configuration up as. So if you set 50,000 connections on port 80 and 50,000 connections on port 8080, then you're going to have 100,000 connections and the thing's going to crash. So think about it. So if you go into the sites of enabled or sites available, alright, so document root var www. If you have a problem with your Apache server and it's underneath etc Apache 2, you can change that here, which is honkin' awesome, without having to kill it and reinstall it. I know I keep on telling you to do that, but that's because I'm an asshole. Right? So your directory var www. Options, follow symbolic links. Right? And that's one of the reasons why when you say do Debian, that way it's just not on your hands. That's because I care, okay?
What did you just more into?
Huh?
Did you just more into sites available?
I moored into the sites available, I've CD'd into sites available, and then opened up the default file. So, root directory, follow symbolic links. So when you go and you do the installer for things like WordPress and all the rest of it, and you see all those L links, those are all your symbolic links, and it's all over the honkin' hard drive. But this is how it's able to read and follow those. Right? Allow overrides? None. So no, nothing can override whatever that symbolic link says. This is where the file is. Don't change it. In the directory var www, Options, indexes, your index.php, index.html, index.htm. It will look for an index file in the directory first. If it doesn't find one, it will go look for one following symbolic links. If it can't find one, then it will go into multi-views, which means it's going to allow you to look at the directory structure of the website. Make sense? So, I would just leave my options at indexes and then follow symbolic links and take multi-views out. That kind of kills them if they want to go through and take a tour your website like they would a file system. Right? Allow overrides none, order, allow, deny, allow from all. You can allow from specific IP addresses if it's an internal corporate network. If your internal corporate network starts with 10 and it's an internal company thing, you can actually do allow from 10 dot and leave it at that. And that will service the inside network but won't service outside. I would actually have to take over an inside computer to then get to this website. So kind of cool? All right. Script alias, CGI bin, user lib, CGI bin, and basically if you use Perl or Python or a bunch of other scripting languages, then this knows where to go find that script and then go run it. All right. And then it sets down the Apache logdir. All right. You can do debug, info, notice, warn, error, critical, alert, emergency. Again, most everyone just leaves it at warn, but if you need more info, go down to debug or info or notice, kind of help your developer out. And then everything is combined with the access log. So if you've made a boo-boo with your Apache web server install, this is one way of fixing it. Does it kind of make sense? You guys good? All right. Now you guys get to go customize your Apache web services. All right. So your mission, should you choose to accept it today. I know. You know, I know. The tape will self-destruct in 5 minutes. There you go. All right. So in DNS, make a custom name for your server. Under which file? Local, right? Underneath your local. All right. And Apache. Okay. Good challenge. So in DNS, make a custom name for your server in DB local. Right? In Apache, use the Apache configuration and the sites available default to put that custom name you made for your box. So it'd be dan.rack6.highline.edu. Okay? Or Monkey or Joe or Happy Fez or Mr. Unicorn, whatever you want to name your box. Right? Then open up a browser and see if you can get to it by typing in mrhappyunicorn.rack6.highline.edu. If you can, then Apache and DNS are working correctly, and they're married nicely, and they'll have fat, happy children. Friday?
By Friday.
Friday good? Friday end of class?
Sure.
Sweet.
Sounds fantastic.
Are you sure? All right. Everybody know what's due tonight?
By midnight.
Any questions? Screenshots of PHP and LDAP. If you do that, you get the points. All right. So you're good?
Yeah.
All right. Let's do it.
Hey, Dan.
Yes, sir.
I suppose you want to review.
I suppose I want what through a GUI? The amazing thing about cell phones nowadays is they come with cameras. Oh, heck yeah. Heck yeah. See, these are beautiful, beautiful instruments.
They really are.
Yeah, and if you're really stuck and you don't have one, you can use mine. I'll share today. Huh?
My admin page, we're supposed to screen cap.
Did you say texting inside of Dropbox?
Well, no, I got it.
All right, let me just do that.